This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, answering the questions of a fan who contacted me by email. She's contacted me before, and I do get people who I get people who contact me and ask me questions. I think I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start answering their questions as a podcast, because the way they ask what I think gives me an opportunity to take a different angle, a different perspective on what they want to know. And it's been very helpful for me to go through what she asked. Her name is Mrs. P. I'm going to leave it at that. I asked her, she actually has contacted me before, and she's from Durban, Republic of South Africa. I've been all over South Africa from 82 to 85. I traveled there a lot, and I've been to Durban, and it's just a spectacular place. One of my favorites, and I would love to take my wife there if we can ever travel again after COVID. Anyway, she asked several questions. She said, "If you're too busy, I understand, but perhaps you have stuff in your archives." Well, I'm just gonna no notes. I'm just gonna tell you what I think and tell you what I know. She says, "Jeff, I know how busy you are, so please forgive me." You don't. I'm not worried about that. I'm happy to. And everybody knows, if you ever contact me by email, I always reply back. Now, if I start getting 100 a day, it may get more difficult. But for right now, when people contact me, I always reply right back. But I'm an old welfare pensioner, simply asking for your opinion, and doing so in confidence. Will never quote you without your permission. Well, Mrs. P. of Durban, Republic of South Africa, you have my permission. So my pleasure. Sorry to be a nuisance, but if you can spare me the time, here are the questions that I find very worrisome. Question number one, and it's a good one. Why is a Biden, she's a clever lady, she puts administration in quotation marks, hell-bent on attacking China, when, from what I understand, Biden is in bed with China. Well, it's hard to say. It's hard, there is so much going on. I call, especially the United States, but all Western countries, I call the leaders cacocrats. And if you look up cacocrat, cacocrat is someone, a leader from the worst of society, a cacistocracy. And unfortunately, the West has mostly cacocrats, and it doesn't matter whether they have an R in front of their name, Republican or Democrat, or in the UK, Liberal or Tory or Liberal Democrat or whatever. It doesn't really matter. They all are beholden to the global capitalist elite, and so going up against China, well, a lot of corruption, a lot of business being done in China. I just read today that Nancy Pelosi just bought $1 million worth of stock in some company that she anyway, it's just Western leaders are, I think, some of the worst in the world, especially compared to Asian countries and communist, socialist, anti-imperial countries, for sure, all over the world. So, the fact, and this is also something that the West does very, very well. If they accuse you of genocide, then it's because they're doing genocide. If they accuse you of corruption, it's because they're corrupt. If they accuse you of being of fomenting war, it's because they are fomenting war. They use psychological warfare. They're so good at it, and the best defense is just aggressive offense. And so like right now, they're going to go after China for genocide in Xinjiang, whereas it's actually the West that's committing genocide all over the world, occupying and invading countries and bioweapons and chemical weapons and everything else. So, it's not just China. I mean, it's Russia. They are, it's just the nature of Western governance. And there was talk that, well, the Democrats are more anti-Russian and the Republicans are more anti-Chinese, but it's a nuance. The global capitalist elites are against any country that is not under their direct control for exploitation and occupation. And if they're not a vassal state, they are being attacked. Why do Americans refuse to understand that China too has a fifth column, and that President Xi is not a part of it, but believe China is all out evil and determined to destroy the USA? Well, every country has a fifth column. Saboteurs. Just ask Mao Zedong. I mean, he spent his entire political career, educating people about the revolution, about communism, about socialism. The Cultural Revolution was his, last big attempt to clean up all the corruption and all the fifth columnists and all the people who were trying to destroy the revolution. This happens, it happens in every country that is has some independence. Russia has its fifth column. China has its fifth column, and the reason that Westerners think that China is completely evil is because of Western propaganda, and it just so happens you're from Republic of South Africa. I'm reading this book right here, Hidden History: The Secret Origins of the First World War by Jerry Doherty and Jim McGregor. It's really, really good. And there's a part 2. I'm going to finish it. But it actually starts in South Africa for the Boer War, and because the British wanted the Transvaals and the Orange Free States mines, the gold mines, and it's really interesting. They actually started planning the Boer War in 1890, and actually in 1890, not only the Boer War, but to destroy Germany. It was all a general plan to destroy, first off, smash and grab the gold in South Africa, and then to destroy Germany because the British could not compete against them industrially and technologically. Sound familiar with China now today? So they planned the Boer War for almost a decade, and one of the ways that they do it, there's 3 legs to the stool. One is to suborn the government. The other one is to suborn the military, control the military, and above and beyond everything, control the media. And so Cecil Rhodes, Nathaniel Rothschild, and a couple, 3 others got together with this plan. But why in the West are we brainwashed just from birth of a free press, freedom of expression, free press, freedom of expression? It doesn't exist, and so they have to brainwash us into believing that, so they can brainwash us about everything that they want to do as far as attacking people, demonizing enemies, going to war especially, and on and on and on. So I actually have a lot of patience with Westerners and their hatred and fear of the Chinese, and because they are brainwashed, and one of the hardest parts of dealing with Westerners is for them to understand just how brainwashed they really are, and that they do not have a free press. They do not have freedom of expression. And I don't know how far back it has not existed, but it definitely started to stop existing in the late 1800s when in the U.S. the giant steel railroad and oil trusts basically took over the country with monopolies and started buying up every newspaper and magazine, and then of course later radio stations and then and television stations. Now, FDR did help. They did control the consolidation of media, but once 1980 hit with neoliberal policies, starting with the Reagan era, now of course that consolidation is all back, and 6 or 7 companies, global media companies own the Western media lock, stock, and barrel. So we are definitely brainwashed people. If the U.S. is sufficiently infantile and to attempt war on China, could it not result in civil war in China? Mrs. P, absolutely not. The Chinese are extremely patriotic. They are extremely nationalistic. And I have actually seen international polls like Pew and Gallup, because they do all these international polls comparing countries and everything else. And they one of the polls they had recently was they asked like maybe 20 countries, if your country was attacked by a foreign military power, would you be willing to go, basically grab a gun? I can't remember the words they used, but basically, would you be willing to fight? Would you? And China was at the very, very top, or one of the very, very top, with like 85% of the people, yes. And then the United States about 40%, and then Europe about 30%. So no, that would never. Now, of course, that's one of the reasons that they do. The West does all these false flags and all this psychological warfare and fake news and everything in the countries that they want to destroy, just like Germany back in World War I. And of course, then they turned around and did it again in World War II. France, the United States, and Britain. But that would never happen. The West would have, if the West attacked China, they'd have 1 billion Chinese to deal with. And I've actually written about this. I know this is perhaps a very selfish question, but where does a small nation like South Africa fit into it all? Is South Africa still a captive of the Western banksters, or does she remain part of the BRICS economic bloc and thus China, and hopefully remains Russia-oriented? Well, Mrs. P, don't feel bad. I mean, unless your country is is a communist, socialist, anti-imperialist country like DPRK, North Korea, China, Vietnam, let me see, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, etc. The Western banksters are there. I mean, they are in your country, and that is so true in Africa. Unfortunately, the Bank of England still controls all of the former colonies and their central banks in East Africa, and France still controls all of the central banks in West Africa, especially with the criminal CFA currency that robs West Africa of billions of dollars a year. So don't feel bad, but I would imagine that South Africa is no different than all the others, since they did not have a real, true socialist revolution. BRICS is having a tough time right now. You've got Brazil with Bolsonaro, the president. I mean, he is a neoconservative, neoliberal, practically, some people, in fact, even I know Brazilians that call him a fascist. So Brazil has definitely, the days of Lula and Wilma Dulcif, the lady that took over after him, and they were both screwed out of being leaders. Brazil is now oriented towards the United States. And India with Modi, I mean, he has decided to, side with the United States, Australia, and Japan with what they call the Quad to try to stand up to China. So BRICS right now is I remember reading maybe like 6 weeks ago or something like that China had extended some loan to the BRICS Bank, they did some financing for some projects, but it's not what it used to be. So you have Brazil and India, who are now definitely aligned to the United States and Europe, and then you have Russia, China, and South Africa who are trying to align together. So it's not what it was 3 or 4 years ago, and that's too bad. South Africa, of course, when I was there, it was apartheid, so I'm sure it's completely different now. But of course, Nelson Mandela, the Madiba, he wanted a socialist revolution, but he in the end renounced it. And so that's what happened in India also. They never had a socialist revolution. Basically, the Brits, just stepped back behind the curtain. They put, the 10%, comprador elitist class in power. So the skin color changed, in India. So now it's still basically controlled by the West, and with brown-skinned, leaders who are just as bought and sold as the Brits were before independence. And I think that's just, you can tell me, but I get the impression that's the same thing that happened in South Africa. You've got now an elitist black leadership that is probably compromised by the West. But I do get this feeling that South Africa's trying to exert itself and trying to be independent and trying to shake off Western imperialism and colonialism, but without a true socialist revolution. I think it's problematic at best, and that's why all the land, trying to distribute the land and businesses and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is all of her questions. I really enjoyed doing this. If any of you out there have questions you'd like to send to me, my email is JEFF. Well, it's on my website, China Rising Radio Sinoland. JEFF@Brown, BROWN, and then connected together, Langlois, LANGLOIS.com. Langlois is my wife's French family name. So JEFF@Brown, Langlois, LANGLOIS.com, all stuck together. And send me any questions you have, and I'd be happy to answer them. And I think this is a great way to take a different look and have a fresh perspective on some of the current topics. So thank you, Mrs. P. from Durban, South Africa, and I hope to hear from you again. Bye-bye.